And let me start my slideshow here.
There it is.
This is actually going to be, this is actually the slideshow that I've videotaped. And what I'm going to do here, because this video is not even out, is our discussion is going to be sort of a teaser, but I think it'll be informative because it'll not only show you how to use it from the front end, what the front end is going to look like, but I'll also share a little bit of code just to tease you, but this should be out within the next couple weeks on DNN Hero, so obviously I'm encouraging people to go and subscribe. Plus a lot of the other cutting edge videos that I've released, I recently did one on Angular, and I don't think anybody's done a real good implementation and video set on Angular, and that just came out in December. So yeah, encouraging people to subscribe and get some real good content. But this one's on workflow. And let's see here. Usually what I do in my videos, Don, is not only do I just put out a video and show something, but I also try to provide a progression. It's almost like a course, you know, there's like 101, 201, 301, and so I always make sure that there's a certain level of prerequisites that I can point users to that are also videos and projects that are on the site. I did the prerequisites to this, and I'll just tell our end users or our community that this is not a basic concept of doing workflow. You really have to understand module development. Not only do you have to understand how to do module development, but you also have to understand some things about data access techniques. And I did a video, it was over a year ago, I believe, on different types of data access techniques in DNN, and one of them was on content items. Are you familiar with content items, Don? I don't know how much you get into it as an integrator.
Yeah, I'm more of the integrator administrator. I would
Yeah.
do more of the Adderson videos than I would of the high end or the low level development stuff.
Yeah. Well, content items, maybe not something you understand, but it's like it's basically a common data layer that DNN came out with like in version 6 something. So it's been around for years. It's just not a lot of developers know about it or have used it. But it's a way to store your data for your module in a way that can be surfaced in either the search or even other modules can maybe share data. Maybe that's the reason maybe some module developers don't use it because they don't want to share their module data, but it does allow you to do that. The thing about content items is in order to use the workflow API in your module, you need to create a content item. So now all of a sudden we have to use it. What I'm showing in this video is even if you have an existing data layer for your module data, well, basically the way I built this project is assuming that you do have a more complex data layer already built for your module, and how to use the content items as just your versioning piece that interacts with the workflow and creates a version of your module data. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the notifications framework. One of the videos I did, and this is almost a year old as well, is how to integrate with the DNN notifications. In other words, how do you pop a notification in, and that has custom actions in there. And so it's just a video that I think people should understand how to use, even though the workflow API takes care of all the notifications for us. So that's kind of a nice thing.
Got it.
What is workflow? I don't know if everybody really understands what workflow is, but if you use the HTML module, which is the most common module that DNN has, you've used it whether or not you set the options or not.
Right.
By default, when you use an HTML module and you put some stuff into the text editor and then you say save, by default it just becomes visible to everybody or to whoever you have as permissions to that page. And the reason it does that is because your workflow by default is set to direct publish, which essentially means no workflow. It means when I hit the save button, the content immediately becomes available.
Right.
But there is also other built-in workflows in DNN that you can check off. And I think a little while ago those were only available to the professional version of the HTML module, but now that these are available to all the versions. The professional version just allows you to customize the notification parts of those workflows, whereas, or at least provides the UI. I'm sure under the covers you could probably actually adjust these in the community version.
Oh, okay.
But the constructs of workflow is, if your module creates some sort of content that's visible in the screen, workflow is the ability to create a review and approval process for it.
Right.
And that's usually it's more complicated than it sounds, or actually maybe it does sound complicated, because it actually kind of is complicated. The workflow API that DNN provides is a way to tap into what the HTML module is doing. In other words, tap into those different workflow processes that have been defined already. It also lets you tap into those. It also lets the framework take care of all the notifications, like I mentioned before. So you no longer have to deal with, oh, okay, I need to send a notification to the role that is supposed to approve the content, and then the actions that role has to take in that notification. You know, because when you use the notifications framework, it has the little links that allows you to do actions.
Right.
The default just being to dismiss the notification, right?
Right.
And it also helps you because there's a digest email process that DNN has built into that says, okay, when you push notifications out, you also want to push out emails to that user as well. So not only do you get notified that you're supposed to approve this content so it can be published, but it also digests it in an email so that you get an email, then you can come back, log into the website, and do it.
Makes sense. Okay.
Notifications should go to appropriate users, and like I said, that's more of a pro. The evoke content that lets you configure what those user roles are that should be the approvers. In the community version, it sort of defaults it to the administrator, so you're a little more limited there, but that's available. And then versioning and rollback is where this gets complex. If you're not just going to allow content to immediately become active on a website, that means you need to store a version of it before it can become active.
Right.
So you immediately, every time you add workflow to a module, adding versioning is imperative, and that immediately makes it much more of a complex issue, because all of a sudden now you have to track multiple versions of this content and have like the ability to have different states on those versions, like this one is in draft, this one's the current published one, and this one, you know, I mean, it gets really complex really quick.
Right.
So let's see what my next thing is a demonstration, and I'm going to just show you how I accomplished this and what you would get if you subscribe, the code that you would get here. So let me see where I think it's Chrome. Okay, so here is a page. I dropped this workflow module on a page. Now, a lot of my DNN Hero subscribers already know that a lot of my videos are based on Chris Hammond's template, module development template. If you've ever installed that, it comes with some pre-built code. And that pre-built code is basically just a CRUD, a create, read, update, delete module. In other words, you can create an item, what's called an item, and that it's just a fictitious, you know, piece of data with a name, a description, and an assigned user, and then adds it to a list. Now, but what I did, my take on that module is to add workflow to it. So all of the normal like entity type stuff and how this thing works is built into the template, but all the workflow parts of it is what I customized. And the first thing is the settings. When you out of the box, the module that you build from the template has 0 settings, and I added 1 setting, which is the workflow process. And these 3 workflows, I don't know if you can, can I make this a little bigger here?
Oh, no problem. I see it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just increase the.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. So there's 3 workflows in there. Now, these come from DNN. These are not something that I just developed inside this module. I'm pulling these from the DNN API, which says how many different workflows do you have currently defined in DNN. In the future, it's possible DNN or any other users could create new workflow processes. But these are the workflow processes, direct publish being really is no workflow process. The minute you save it, it publishes it.
Right.
And then you have a save draft, which is a two-stage process, which means there's a draft version of it, and then it's published. And then you have a more complex, which is the content approval, which is a three-stage process. You have to create the draft, you have to submit the draft for the review, and then the reviewer has to approve it, and that becomes published. So it's 1, 2, and 3-state workflows.
Okay.
So if I put it on direct publish and I hit update, whenever I go to create an item, I'll hit add item, and I'll call it save draft item. This is just fictitious. I'll put some data in the description. I'll assign it to a user, and I'll hit save. The moment I hit save, the item is available. Now I have another browser open here on the same page, and I'm going to refresh that page. Now notice from an anonymous user that is immediately published. It's available to be seen. Okay.
Right.
Now I'm going to go change the setting, and I'm going to move it to save draft, and we're going to look at how that works. I'm going to go ahead and add a new item here. I'll call it save. Oh, I meant to be calling. What was the other one called? Direct publish?
Save draft item.
Oh, yeah. Whoops, that should be called direct publish. So I'm going to rename it here. Oh, yeah, so interestingly enough, because I changed the workflow, it immediately changes it for that item. So let me just publish that real quick. Okay. Okay, direct publish item. Now my next one's going to be the save draft item.
Okay, I follow you.
Yeah, sorry. I meant to call the first one save direct publish.
Sure.
Okay, so I call this the save draft. Now initially, notice that it shows it here because I'm an admin and I'm editing it. It shows it as unpublished. But if I'm not an admin, I'm just a normal average Joe user, I refresh the page and notice that new item is not here yet, just the first one that we did.
Sure, that makes sense.
So it's in a draft. And notice also that I have a workflow notification here, a DNN notification. It says a new draft of the item save draft has been created. So I need to submit or discard. Discard, I believe, will just delete it because at this point it's a draft, so delete the whole thing. And then submit. Once I submit it, notice that on the page here, there's no longer that unpublished.
Mm-hmm.
And then from an anonymous user, I'm going to refresh the page. Now it's published. Okay?
Exactly.
So that's our two-stage process.
Okay.
Next up, we got to do we'll change the setting to the content approver and hit update. Now I'm going to create a new item, and I'm going to call this content approval item. Hit save. And again, just like the save draft, it's not published. And then I got a notification. The notification says a new draft has been created, so it's very similar to the save draft flow.
Right.
The only difference is when I hit submit and I go back to the module, it's still unpublished. It's a three-stage process. At this point, now it's the approver that has to review and approve it. Since I assigned it to the admin, it's also available to my host user since he is administrator to approve it.
Right.
But just for the sake of showing this, I'll log in as the admin, which I was before I was a host.
Right.
And then you can see that the admin actually received it as well, that this item has been marked ready for review, and he can approve or reject it. Rejecting it will move it back to, I believe, a draft state, and there'll be another notification, and then it just kind of creates a circular loop until it finally gets approved. So when I hit approve, now it's approved, and just to test that, now you can see it's approved. So you have that 1 state, 2 state, 3 states of approval process.
Got it.
So back to my PowerPoint here, I'll just kind of give users a little bit of knowledge on what the correct architecture is in order to create this process. Where's my PowerPoint? Somewhere. Here it is. So this is where it gets complex. When I create an item, I'm going to actually do two things simultaneously. The first thing I'm going to do is create what I call the main content item. This would be what gets done in the default implementation of this template. In other words, save off the record to the database saying that I have this new item with a name and description. Okay? So that's the main database item that just gets saved into the table for this module. But then at the same time, I'm creating a content item, which is this special API in DNN called the Content Items API, or actually it's called the Content API, and it stores it in the Content Items table under the covers. And the Content Items table is where all sorts of, it's like a grab bag of data items in DNN. Like the HTML module has some content items, certain pages store content items. It's just a grab bag of data. And so what I do was I serialize the main content item. I serialize the data that got stored in the main content item as just the serialized blob. It's actually serialized as JSON and stored in this content element of that content item, which in the table is the content record, which is this big end text blob field. Like I said, it's a grab bag. You can put anything in that thing. And then I store that. So what happens is I have two different things being stored at the same time. It's a little bit of a duplication of data. And then what happens is I call the workflow API, which is brand new in DNN 4, and I say, here's this content item, start the workflow process. And what that means is it understands, you tell it, okay, I've selected the workflow process content approver, which was in the settings, and I just throw it in there with the workflow and say, here's the content item, here's the workflow process that I want to do, and it takes it in, and what it does is I've registered several workflow state classes, and this is a little bit deeper in, and this is what it will be in the training that you can follow. But you have to register 5 or 6 workflow state item classes, and you tell it that this is the content item type that I'm registering for. The content item type being just the name of my module, and once DNN knows that, and once I start this workflow, it knows that it needs to alert one of my action classes of what state it's in. Based on what the user, did. I know that's kind of hard to conceptualize, but basically, when I start the workflow, DNN says, okay, I'm starting the workflow and I'm doing the content approval workflow. What's the first thing I need to do? Well, I need to send a draft notification that tells the person who created the item that you need to submit this draft for review. So when it creates that notification, notice it created those links to approve or reject it, or approve or reject or discard, I think it was, the draft. When the user hits approve, what happens is that will tell a core DNN service that, hey, this person wants to approve this. Well, now what? Well, what it's going to do is say, well, where did this come from? Well, it came from this special module that Scott developed. So alert his action that he registered with us when we installed the module, that it's going to that the state is being changed. And so I built out a class where it says, okay, the state is changing, therefore, the state is being changed to approve. So what do you want to do next? And then I wrote some code that says, oh, okay, that's been approved. Then I might not do anything. It might just be, okay, just move on to the next state change, or tell DNN I don't need to do anything, just move on.
Got it.
And then DNN will say, okay, great. Well, it knows to track that it moved that content item to the next state. So DNN handles the core handles all that for you. So we're just kind of in this circular pattern here.
Right.
And DNN's handling everything and sending these events back to my module to say, hey, do you want to do anything during this state? And for the most part, I don't need to do anything. The state that I'm really concerned with is this workflow complete. That's when the reviewer has approved it, and then I need to actually make the thing visible. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because when I'm in here, I'm just letting DNN update the content item with the new state, and that's, whatever. It's approved, fine, whatever. It's only when it's been completed or approved finally to complete the state that I'm wanting to do something. And that's true of all the states, like whether or not, with the save draft, it's only the approved state that I care about. So once I get to that approved state, I wrote some code that says, okay, now that I've gotten through the workflow and the item's been approved, I'm at the end of the workflow state. That's when I need to update this item to active, to tell it that it's active, so that all other users can view it. And not only that, but it replaces the version of the item. In other words, that content item may have had some changes to this main item, and those changes need to get overridden. So in my next slide here, I show the update process, which if you blinked, you might not have noticed anything changed. The update process does everything exactly the same. The only difference is once I get to the workflow complete, I need to update this main item with maybe a change to the name or the description of that item, you know what I mean, or any other piece of data that's custom to your module data. I need to update all that information that was stored in this versioned item in the main item, and then set that to active. Let me give you just a little bit of a taste of what that looks like when you're editing an item. So in this item, I'm going to edit this now that I'm on the approval state. I'm going to edit this item, and I'm going to add a very obvious entry here. Version 2, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to hit save. Now notice nothing changed. The version 2 is not in my description here.
Okay.
The reason is because it's still in the workflow state. Now I built this history to show what's the difference between these content items, which are my versions, and the main item. You can see here that this one that's in bold is the one that's published and the one that's current. And I have another version that's in a draft state. So the one that all the users are seeing is the old one. The new one is not ready to be seen yet. And I also added some shortcuts here in this screen. So if you are a super user, you can just move to the next state real easily. So you don't have to like log out and log in as the approver or do anything like that.
Oh, okay.
So if I hit approve here, and then it's ready for review. But notice it's ready for review, but it's still the old version.
Right.
Once I get to this, so like I said, ready for review is one of those interim states that just kicks it back to the workflow process to send more notifications, but I don't actually care about that state. But once I move it to the approval or the published state, then notice what happened was the second version became bolded, it became the current.
Right.
And the old version is still is technically published, it still exists, but it's no longer the current version. So now if I reload the page notice now that becomes the new version.
Yes.
So the workflow is complex because, all this processing to do what without versioning or without workflow, it's just simply updating a record in the database and boom, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a high-level concept. But DNN makes it slightly easier by providing this workflow engine for us. It'd be nice if they provided maybe, and again, this is the very first time they've done this, so I can see maybe some future iterations where they do something like provide maybe this front end to us instead of us having to build this history or this version front end. They maybe provide a generic one for all all modules can use. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Is there a
unfortunately, they don't.
Is there some core that's taking advantage of the new workflow API?
Oh, absolutely. So the two things that are, and just a little history behind why DNN built it was the HTML module for many versions. I can't remember when they introduced it, but
Quite a long time.
Quite a long time has had this versioning in it. And I don't know if you remember, I think it was 7.2, the new file manager or digital asset manager then started putting in or added this ability to do workflow. In other words, you can actually put, I don't know if I can access it from the admin. Maybe I can. Let's see if it does it. Default folder type. Maybe it's on the folder. Folder properties. You know what? Maybe that's just a professional thing. I'm positive that there on the file manager you can now set workflow, and I think it's even at the folder level, so you can actually enforce a workflow where if a user even uploads an image, that has to go through a review process.
Oh.
So you get this fully integrated, because what's weird about how DNN was before is you would have workflow on the HTML module, but in HTML modules you want to put images in, maybe embed a video or whatever, or embed a file, a PDF file or something that people can click on. Well, what's weird about it is you can immediately upload a document or image because there's no workflow behind it. But then there's workflow for approving the fact that you've added that image to the HTML document.
Well, true, right.
So
you can get direct access to the PDF that you uploaded or the image that you uploaded if you know the address, but you wouldn't see it applied in the HTML module until the module is published.
Yeah, sure. So, but they try to make it to where so they added workflow to the file manager to allow that interaction where not only do you have to approve the HTML change, but you have to approve the file change as well. But then they had another problem. Now they had two different workflow mechanisms that didn't really talk together. So what they did was they had to combine the construct, make it a core construct in the core to say what are the workflows and what modules participate in them. And then they'd said, well, if we're going to do that for the HTML and file manager module, we might as well make that an API such that other modules can plug into it. And I think that's a great thing, because one of the problems we've had recently, so we have a client that for Blue Bolt, we obviously use PackFlash for a lot of our implementations, right? PackFlash has been around for a few years. It has its own workflow because it had to. You had to build your own workflow up until now. Well, how nice would it be now, and this is probably something we're going to put on our PackFlash roadmap, to be able to plug into the same workflow concepts and constructs that DNN has, such that if there's no confusion to a user. The workflow, if you're setting the content approval workflow for your HTML modules and for PackFlash, the workflow looks the same to everybody. In other words, it's the same notifications. It's the same content you get in the emails. You know what I mean? It's the same approval process. So it makes it a lot more cohesive when you're talking about, different vendors and different modules having all their own, they're rolling all their own workflow process and all their own, the concepts are all foreign. They're all using different email type templates, using different role assignments. Who are your approvers? It becomes a mess, and this will hopefully in the future make it a little more cohesive.
Makes sense. All right.
Yeah. And I guess without getting a ton into the code, I guess I think that pretty much wraps it up. Hopefully that's enough of a teaser for those of you who are developers out there who want to go, get a real working and fairly tested implementation of workflow to be able to steal all the code and make it work for your own purposes.
No, I think that's great because I think more and more of them. I've had many people ask for some kind of permission mechanism, some kind of review mechanism that really wasn't there. There has been the HTML module, and I have implemented workflow with the HTML module for some clients. But I mean, a lot of people do what I'd call the poor man's version of it, where they build a copy of a page. And they lay out all of that second page, make it so that it's visible only to administrators, visible only to a particular role, and then they build it all out, and then they ask for approval from their bosses, their management, and once they get approval, they swap out those pages. Having it built into the core allows them to be able to build those things up, and then when the appropriate people go onto the site, they see that they've been asked to look over this page with these various modules on it that all are waiting for permission, approval. They click and go, and the page gets updated. So to have that built into the core is wonderful. Obviously, like you said earlier, it's brand new to 7.4. So you and maybe 2 other people in the world are playing with it right now, and we're getting. But we can use that capability in many of the modules. So I can see some of our database record modules and stuff that could roll into this rather than try and do their own thing. And obviously the news and article management types.
And any type of article management, absolutely. Like you said, one of the problems we have with how with PackFlash, the workflow is pretty good in PackFlash, but one of the issues you have is when you have a combination, or clients using DNN and PackFlash, they're doing a combination of PackFlash articles, events, or whatnot, plus HTML modules and these type of things. And one of the problems is like, okay, so the user has to go in, log into the site, the ones that are approving and doing actually the administrative work, and they have to go, oh, well, that was so I have got to go to my PackFlash work items tab and look at my queue of what I need to approve, right? And then I've got to go somewhere else to look at my queue of where I need to approve my HTML articles. And then if you've got another module, then I've got, so you got to go all these different places. If they all use the same approval process, your notifications, you just log in as a user, go to your notifications tab, your queue of what you need to do is all right there. And you saw how easy it is. I just click a link, approve, 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 approve.
Exactly.
And, or reject or view to look at over it, So it makes the administrators' lives, the content editors' lives a lot easier, because all you got to do is log in, go to your notifications framework, and start clicking on a bunch of links.
Right. Yeah, I definitely see, especially in slightly larger organizations where there's multiple people involved. I'll tell you, they're going to love this capability to be able to just see the list of things they need to do. Because right now they have to kind of hunt around the website or rely on an email or a text from somebody to direct them to the thing that they need to approve. So this is very good. Okay, well, great. Thanks very much for showing this. I understand you're going to be posting this in DNN Hero coming up pretty soon. Next, I don't know.
Yes, I guess what we could do, Don, is you normally post a wrap-up video pretty soon after our session.
Right.
What I could do is, as soon as this is ready to go, I will update that article, on our Chicago DNN user group website, and provide the link to it. Like I said, it will be a premium video, which means you have to be a subscriber. But I'll provide the direct link to it, and if you're not a premium subscriber, you'll have to log in with your credentials, but you'll know exactly where to find it.
Great. Thanks very much, Scott. This is wonderful. Scott is an MVP, a DNN MVP,
Hmm.
and of course he's right here in Chicago. So
Yep.
we thank you very much for this, and look forward to talking with you next month or the months to come.
Yep.
You're not heading to where is it, France? Are you heading
I
to Europe?
I am.
You are
I
fantastic.
am.
So
I just recently just put finalized plans, so I will be in France in May.
right, DNN Connection is
DNN.
doing
Yep.
their annual meeting, and that'll be in France. So enjoy,
Hmm.
find a good wine, um,
Yeah.
and obviously,
And our June meeting, you now have a topic definitely for the June meeting.
yes, exactly. What I did in France this May.
Exactly.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks very much. Talk to you soon.
No problem. Thanks.
All righty.
Bye.